So hello everybody, this is Bhante Joe here, and I'm just here at Badeka Vihari, which is the monastery where I stay. I'm staying in Sri Lanka, and this is the shrine room here. So I thought to record a short Awada for the internet. I kind of asked our abbot's permission to record an Awada, and he said minimum 1 hour as a joke. But I think maybe do the usual 15 to 25 minutes. So I could maybe start with a little meditation, so we can lean forward a little bit and arch our spine and look about 3 feet in front and close the eyes. And can focus in on the breath. Can know when it's coming in and know when it's going out. If we breathe in a long breath, can just know I'm breathing in a long breath. And if we breathe in a short breath, can just know I'm breathing in a short breath. And can relax any patterns of tension or tightness around the face. And can practice breathing in and out from the tip of the nose. And when breathing in and out from the tip of the nose, can be helpful to make one's mindfulness as continuous as possible. Trying to be aware all the way through the in-breath. As the in-breath turns to the out-breath. All the way through the out-breath. And as the out-breath turns back to the in-breath again. Trying to make mindfulness as continuous as possible. And before we finish meditating, can spread thoughts of goodwill, wishing may all beings all around everywhere be happy and at ease. May they put in place the causes necessary to be happy and at ease. And we can make the mind infinite, can make it unbounded, all the way to the ends of the universe and beyond, in every dimension. May all beings all around everywhere be happy and at ease. And can open our eyes and do a short reflection on the Dhamma. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dhammāṃ saranang gacchāmi, Sanghaṃ saranang gacchāmi. Dutiyampi Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Dhammāṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Sanghaṃ saranang gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Dhammāṃ saranang gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Sanghaṃ saranang gacchāmi. So I hope that everybody is having a great day wherever it might be. And yeah, we've just got some rain coming down here, so hope that the sound comes through okay. And so this past few days ago was actually Wesak, which celebrates the birth, enlightenment, and parinibbana, or commemorates, I guess would be a better word, of the Buddha, who is our great teacher, who is the founder of this religion that we now call Buddhism. Actually, the Buddha's name for his religion was Dhamma-Vinaya, kind of called so the Dhamma is generally considered to be the suttas, the Vinaya is considered to be the monastic rules. And this was the kind of way that he summed up his, used the one compound word to describe his teachings. And so the Buddha was kind of, his life is a kind of archetype, something that one can look at and one can, see as a kind of pattern, even for Buddhist practitioners today. I remember when I first read about the life of the Buddha. I think I was in high school at the time, or possibly, I was in university at the time, I think, actually. And didn't know anything about the Buddha or the Indian context or the Indian culture that he grew up in. And some of the things were really hard to understand. Kind of, the samana culture was something that I just never had any thought about before. It's kind of these wandering kind of philosophers who would beg for alms and then come up with different philosophical theories, and even kings would come to see them and watch them debate. And this was something that, actually I kind of basically no context for, kind of growing up in Canada in a modern capitalist economy, and almost, even not so much religion around when I was there. So this was something that was kind of very different, kind of reading about the samanas, reading about their different philosophies, reading about the ways that they would interact with the kings and these various things. But then when it came to reading about the Buddha's life story, what he did and why he did it, that resonated, even though it was kind of 2,500 years later. It's kind of, it's kind of his, some of the things in his life make sense even today. He had almost every almost every pleasure one could want, he had. He was kind of very rich. His father was a very rich and influential person in Kapilavatthu, where he grew up. Had these kind of 3 houses, one for the rains, one for the cold, one for the hot season. And basically almost everything a person could want. And this, of course, kind of maps well to society today. It's basically in modern Western society, at least in Canada, where I grew up, kind of very wealthy country. People have everything that or many people anyway, maybe not everybody, but people are incredibly wealthy, much more wealthy possibly even in terms of their material goods, in terms of their food, in terms of their ability to do things like fly around the world, maybe even more wealthy, more wealthy than the wealthiest kings in those particular ways back then. And yet, even having all these things, even kind of being in this kind of situation, still in the modern West, it's kind of known that people are dissatisfied, kind of unhappy. And similarly with the Buddha, this kind of resonates even today, that he had everything he wanted, but still couldn't find satisfaction in that, couldn't find lasting happiness in that. And so following this, he decided to renounce everything, kind of leave his home and become a wanderer. And even though this was something kind of totally alien, I actually remember reading some of these stories, like about there was one fellow, Christopher, or actually I think I watched that movie. You know, there's a famous story about this fellow, Christopher Johnson McCandless, who just kind of renounced his family and left, and read in the news the other day about a kind of, or maybe it was last year actually, about a kind of fellow who just kind of renounced everything, drove his car as far as it could go, and then drove it to the top of a forest, abandoned his car, and then just kept walking south as far as he could go. And then, you know, basically lived on his own in the wilderness for 20 years or so. Of course, he ended up stealing things to make that possible. But this kind of seemed to hit a chord. These stories seemed to hit a chord, a fascination with people, which shows that this kind of ideal of looking for something outside of the normal social ways of finding happiness, the normal ways of kind of getting more cars or more wealth, this still strikes a chord in people. This kind of still is something that they can understand. And so the Buddha's quest, in a way, also kind of made a lot of sense, because it's something that's kind of seemed scientific. You know, you had a goal to it. It's kind of how to put an end to this whole massive suffering. And when he was going about his quest, he would always kind of seem to try out an avenue, almost like modern science. This is something that also, despite being 2,500 years ago, can relate. Something didn't work, okay, try a particular avenue, maybe with a particular theory, and see how far it goes. So following his leaving the home life, he studied with 2 meditation teachers. He had the extremes of pleasure, and he decided to go the other way. I think maybe kind of the path to the deathless is to be found by basically abstaining from almost any type of pleasant contact that there could be. Kind of ended up going that way, even to the extent that when he touched his stomach, he could feel his spine, and kind of when he rubbed his arms, his hair would rot out. He had these kind of 5 ascetics attending him. Eventually he decided that, you know, his painful feelings, he'd gone as far as he could go. At best, people could only equal that, what he'd achieved, or, you know, as far as he'd gone with the asceticism. And so it was at that time that he decided to take some solid food. And there were these 5 ascetics who'd been helping him and attending him, and they abandoned him. So then he was on his own. And he decided to make a vow that, you know, he would sit down to meditate. He wouldn't get up until he achieved Nibbana. So in other words, he would die there if he didn't achieve Nibbana. And this is when he actually did find the kind of way to the ending of suffering. So this is something also that's relevant today, even in today's world, today's search, this kind of archetype of the Buddha's life, that one can look as far as one can try to find in sensual pleasures. One can look as far as one can try to find in, say, self-denial, in asceticism. But what one really tends to need to look for is to actually try to find a way to renounce these things mentally. And often, as even today, whoever tries to follow in the Buddha's footsteps, all the various things that they used to put their weight on in their life tend to start to fall away the more that they try to advance on his path. And this is kind of similar, I guess you might say, a similar archetype to what the Buddha went through. Of course, his was much more extreme. You know, all of his friends left him. He was left totally alone, even without all the results of his previous quest. But continued on kind of determination alone, kind of with this desire, you know, even if I have to die, I'll find the path to the deathless. I'll discover it. And so this is something that even practitioners who really want to advance in the Buddha's teaching, they might find themselves facing these kind of situations, because as they continue going, continue developing their practice comes to a point where it starts to pull against certain aspects of their life. And either they let go of those aspects of their life and continue on with their practice, or they let go of their practice and continue on with those aspects of their life. So in this way, this kind of archetype is still relevant, even if one becomes a monk, whatever one might do, then eventually one might find oneself in situations where one's basically renouncing these things. Maybe these various things whatever one used to put one's weight on, as one tries to go more and more forward, all these things start to fall away. Like I remember I was playing this video game with my cousin one time, and he would play this video game, and he had to jump on these kind of like stones in this pool of lava. And I think as he was jumping, the stones started to fall away. They were falling in the opposite direction. But this can be like this. One is going forward in this kind of pool of lava, and all of a sudden these stones that want to put one's weight on start to sink into the lava, so one only has the choice to basically take the next step. And so this kind of thing is something that one can look to the Buddha for, look to faith in him for. And so of course after this he spent 45 years kind of traveling in northern India, all over the place, wandering by foot, and teaching basically anybody who had the capacity to understand. There's a lot of touching stories about him teaching outcasts, there are touching stories about him teaching social outcasts. There's at least one that I know of him, teaching many different types of people, and or at least one that I know of. Where there was one fellow who was an outcast, and he became a monk, and then Mahabrahma comes to visit him after he attains arahantship. But in any event, this is why we have the body of the Buddha's teachings, which lay out the path to the deathless, which is still available even now, even 2,500 years later. And then one of the last teachings that the Buddha gave, after he'd wandered for 45 years, he relinquished his will to live, and he lay down to pass away between these two sal trees. One of the second last thing he asked was, does anybody have any questions? To make sure that people could clear up their doubts. And the last thing he said was, therefore I declare to you, all conditioned phenomena are impermanent. So achieve, he didn't say so, but all conditioned phenomena are impermanent, achieve completion through heedfulness. And then he went through all the jhanas and then entered parinibbana after that. He kind of passed away. And so basically his presence is no longer available in the world. And this was one of the last teachings that he gave, actually, or the last teaching he gave, I guess you could say, one could say, is his passing away, which is that this goal of the deathless supersedes all other goals. Whatever goal a person might have, all of this is aimed at happiness in a person's life, whatever they want. If they want a new car, want a new job, if they want good health, they want status, they want a pretty face, sometimes even things they don't want. Those are all tend to be aimed at this goal of happiness. But its true achievement, what the Buddha found, is through this renunciation, through this destruction of craving, which also means the kind of complete renunciation of the world. It's kind of the world is led around by craving. When a person detaches from the world, they become somebody who's separated from it when they cut off craving. And so in this way, the kind of Buddha's message, his life as a paradigm, kind of is something that one can take inspiration from all the way through one's practice, even now, even 2,500 years later. Although we don't have the same culture of wandering philosophers, although there's all this modern technology, it's still the case that sensual pleasures, when a person pursues sensual pleasures, they don't leave a person satisfied. No matter how many cars a person has, no matter how many houses a person has, no matter how much status a person has, it'll never be enough to give lasting satisfaction, never be enough to give a permanent happiness. And also the opposite is also true. If a person pursues the complete denial of these things, the kind of complete denial, say of like food, all these various things, happiness isn't to be found in that either. And kind of happiness is to be found in this middle way. It's kind of this way for which the Buddha, the Buddha gave these things up to try to find a better way. And even today, this kind of renunciation is something that one can do, something that's necessary. And just as the Buddha's 5 companions abandoned him, so too as one continues to practice, the various things that one used to put one's weight in one's life on fall away. And the Buddha's final message, his final teaching, his final words, and his passing away into parinibbana, those are something that a person can take inspiration from, kind of look to a bit like a torch as one goes onwards, which is that whatever happens in the world, whatever happens in one's life, I mean, one tries to do things skillfully, but the priority of one's life becomes nibbana. The priority of one's life becomes a cessation of suffering. And this is the highest thing that one can do for oneself, and can also be seen as the best thing that one can do for others. The Buddha's final teaching, this is the way to go. This is the way to live, and this is the way to pass away. To pass away as one who has no more defilements, to pass away as one who has no more suffering, to pass away into nibbana, to pass away into a happiness that doesn't change. So for this kind of Wesak week, joining together with all the other Buddhists in the world to pay homage to our great teacher, the Lord Buddha, who opened the doors to the deathless 2,500 years ago, and thanks to his efforts, thanks to his 45 years of teaching, thanks to the example of his life, these doors to the deathless are still open for anybody who wishes to cross through them. So homage and respect to our teacher. So leave that for reflection, and hope that everybody has a great day, and wishing you all the best till next time.